With a strategic land bank of over 45,000 units, Thakeham occupies a position that many SMEs aspire to. So co-founding Thakeham over 20 years ago, tell me about your career and the journey into property that led to the founding of Thakeham.
Well, that's a big question, Simon. So my career is all in property sales, and I left school at 16, wanted to go to college to become an electrician. My father said, "You don't want to do that and crawl around someone's dusty loft rewiring their house." He had a big estate agency business. He said, "Well, once you work out what you want to do, come and work for me, and then you can go and do what you want." So that was on the Friday. Started work on the Monday, and within 3 years, I had my own shop. And within 5 years, I had a number of shops I was looking after for his business, and didn't look back. Took to property sales like a duck to water. It was quite an interesting time in the market in the mid-90s. You know, we'd just come out of a recession caused by various different things, double virus, interest rates, etc. And it was back in the day when you could buy a one-bedroom flat for £30,000. And it was it was a very, very fast market, very, very vibrant.
So that's quite quick growth to gaining those additional branches. What's the reason, that you achieved that and others didn't, do you think?
Yeah, so I think that looking back at it now, I definitely had a work ethic that was maybe stronger than my contemporaries. I think part of that was seeing my father build his business and learning that leaving the house at 7 and coming back at 8 in the evening, that's just what you do. As opposed to having someone that kind of left the house at 8, came back at 5:30 and you all sat down for dinner. That wasn't our family life. So I think I saw his work ethic and that rubbed off on me. I mean, in 1992, he had the biggest Vodafone bill in the UK, and he did about
what a claim!
And he did about 40,000 miles. And for having the biggest Vodafone bill, they gave him a year's free line rental, which back in 1992 was actually worth something. So I definitely learnt the sort of value of work from him. And of course, when you're working in a family business, there's always that feeling of nepotism. You're only there because of who you are. And I think that made me subconsciously now, and I don't remember it at the time, just dig deep and go, okay, well, I'm going to have to outsell everybody. I'm going to have to outwork everybody and outperform everybody. So became the youngest branch manager in the company, then became the youngest regional manager in the company. I really enjoyed that. The early noughties particularly was a brilliant market. 70 hours a week wasn't uncommon. It was really good fun. And then eventually managing a group of offices is a different challenge. You're not selling, you're managing salespeople, and that is a totally different kettle of fish. It's like herding cats, and salespeople will naturally choose a path of least resistance. So trying to keep them on the path of resistance that brings the best results is hard work. And what happened was, I can remember it very, very clearly. 2001-2, we'd recruited from our main competitor their area director. And we recruited this area director, and he came to work for the company to run one office, which was a real coup for us. Bit odd. We thought, okay, well, that's fine. So he turned up to run the Horsham office, which literally was the adjoining office to mine. So naturally, we had to work closely together. But I remember this guy turning up, big character, big pinstripe suit, bombastic, in the first managers meeting. I thought, blimey, you're a character. And then, as was the time back in that period of time, early noughties, after a managers meeting, you went to the pub.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do it now, but then you went to the pub and got chatting to this guy, and thought, he's all right actually. He's into cars, he's into watches, he's into all this kind of stuff, which I was into at the time and still am. And we just struck up a great friendship. And that bombastic manager that did a great job was Rob Boughton, who is our founder of Thakeham and our chief executive. And that's when we met 22 years ago. Struck up a great friendship, and over that period of time, Rob then left the estate agency in 2005 to set up Thakeham full time. He'd started it on the side in 2003, did it full-time in 2005. And as Rob started to do a refurb here, did the first new build, I remember that in Horsham, a bungalow, he would come to me at the weekends and say, could you help me do a bit of market research on what we think, that plot might sell for when we finished it? It's like, yep, no problem at all. And unwittingly, that was the kind of the beginning of the end, if you like, of my estate agency career, because I got sucked into this development world. Really thought this is a different side of the coin here for me. So I started to invest in the business, and before you knew it, I left the family business of estate agency and joined Rob. And that's when, if you talk to Rob, he'd say, well, that's when Thakeham 2.0 started, and we got going. So we were building maybe, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 houses a year, and suddenly we bought sites for 10 and 14. We thought we were Laurie Barrett. Of course, looking back at it now we're doing live projects of 600 homes. It seems quite funny, the kind of stresses and strains we went through building 10.
Yeah.
And you kind of go, you wouldn't even blink at that now. It's not
Yeah.
even a sub phase in a phase. So that was the career, and into being a developer.
Excellent. And so as Thakeham sits today, with 45,000, there's a big number in its strategic land bank.
Mm-hmm.
What have been the main milestones on that journey? So we have lots of house builders listen to this and, will aspire to that kind of figure.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's a series of events that gets you there. What were the main milestones that you'd say to this point?
So I think there were several main milestones. First of all, we were able to attract some outside investment, and that gave us capital to invest in projects. And we invested some of that capital in sites with planning permission to build.
That was very early on, was it?
Yeah, that was about 2010, 2011, 2012. But what me and Rob realised pretty quickly was, even then, when the market was not as strong as it has become, the land market was still strong. And actually, the person that was promoting the land and getting the planning permission was probably making as much profit as the person then going on to build the development, but with a lot less perceived aggravation. I'll use that term perceived because, of course, we now realise it's not that easy. So bringing the investment was important, realising that we needed to get involved in the front-end land promotion side so that we could bring sites through that had a better margin to protect us, but also so that we could actually be in control of the raw material, which was the land. So we signed our first option in 2011. And lots of people are in a strategic land business. I think there's a conception that strategic land is something that could get planning in the next 5 years. That's not how we look at it. Short term is kind of 1 to 3 years, medium term is kind of 3 to 7, 8, and strategic is kind of 7, 8 plus. And in fact, last night there was a local plan adopted in Mole Valley, which is a South Surrey planning authority, and we have 3 sites allocated in that local plan, which is now adopted, and we signed those sites up in 2012.
Wow.
So they've taken 12 years to promote those sites into a local plan. We've got planning applications pending on 2 of them already. So there'll be a 12-year journey of investment, highs, lows, political dramas, land dramas, legal dramas, to get to the end result. Now, the outturn for those sites from a margin point of view will be really strong for us, which is, of course, what we set out to achieve.
But when you sat down in 2012, that's a long journey you've got to fund.
Yeah,
isn't
we didn't realise that.
Yeah.
I think that is. We've often said sometimes our naivety got us involved in projects that if we knew then what we know now, would we have got involved? Maybe, but maybe in a different way. So I think sometimes that naivety has definitely helped us commit to things, and when you're committed to it, you've got to make it work. You just got to get on with it.
And would you say, is that strategic land market more competitive now? What's changed? What's changed that makes it harder for someone to look at Thakeham and think, that I'd like that to be me in 20 years' time?
Yes, I think when we started signing options in 2011, 2012, 2013, there were strategic land promoters out there and land promoters, but definitely the number of them in the market has increased dramatically. I think that's because more investors understand the strategic land model, and therefore, there are lots of people starting their own business, from home or from a small office, using often someone else's money to um, create these opportunities and fund them, and then realise the profits at the end. There's been some pretty profile sales of strategic land businesses in the last 5 years. You had Gallagher being sold to L&Q Estates for 600 million odd, and then you had Gladman being sold. And I think that's probably lit a bit of a fire with some people going, crikey, there's some serious money involved in this business. So there's a lot more competition now. I think the advantage we have now that we didn't have then is that we've got lots of sites in delivery, lots of sites that have been delivered that we can take to people and say, look, this is what you're going to end up with. Or if you don't care what ends up on that site, because some landowners really care and some landowners don't care. And if they really care, they will appreciate our design ethos and our architecture and how we preserve the natural asset on the site, how we add community benefit to the project, so that they're not just seen as a landowner that pocketed. They're seen as a landowner that chose a developer that can actually enhance the community, and that's important to us. Some landowners, it's just about the return, and in that case, we can say, right, okay, we can understand that, but look, we've got a track record here of delivery that we can demonstrate to the local authority. If you pick this site, we will deliver it, and this is what you're going to get. And that takes time to build that reputation with local authorities. And we've now got that reputation with some local authorities, where they will come to us and say, really like what you're doing on that particular site. Have you got other projects in the area that you could talk to us about now for consideration in the future local plans? And of course, there's a formal process for doing that. But ultimately, people make decisions about sites and which sites are allocated, not algorithms. And therefore, knowing who is behind that project and who is going to deliver it is important to local authorities, without a doubt.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that business is a kind of game of stepping stones, and the opportunities that come across your desk now, you could never have dreamed of back in 2010. But it's the steps that you take to build that portfolio that enable you to win that next job. It's the same in our kind of marketing world. It's the last job is our next case study to win the next, and
That's right.
You've got to view every development as though it's that's the one that's going to win you the next. And I know that with your attention to detail and design, that is certainly the ethos of Thakeham. So talk to me about like Wellborn. That's a great case study for you. How do you come across an opportunity like that?
Obviously, Wellborn is it is going to be a kind of a site that has a kind of sub-regional pull. It's a site that's going to have great strategic importance. It's going to have great aspirational importance, I think, for lots of people, and I think it's going to be a really interesting case study for other landowners and other local authorities on how you can bring developments forward. And how that opportunity came about was Mark, who owns Wellborn, had a strong passion to work with SME developers or family-owned or founder-run businesses, and he wanted to find regional businesses that could help him achieve his goal for the project. So, we were delighted when we were approached by John Beresford and the team at Wellborn to come and have a conversation about, do you want to be involved in a project? How would that involvement look? And we were identified by them as being, a founder-run business with attention to detail, who built a good quality product at scale, and where architecture was important to us and quality of finish was important to us. And I think ultimately the ability for John or Mark to pick up the phone and talk to myself or Rob about a problem, which they have done, and I'm sure we will continue to do so, was really important to them. Could we have been considered for that opportunity 10 years ago? No.
Yeah.
as you rightly say, Simon, we had to go through those stepping stones to get to the position where we be considered for it now.
Excellent. And as your job role today, the title of Chief Sales Officer, what does your role look like on the day to day?
Well, sales obviously is a big part of my function within the executive team. So I've got a number of live projects underneath me. I've got a very competent sales director who manages the project for me on a day-to-day basis. But it is about reviewing, what we've got under offer, the pipeline that's coming through to convert to support the group cash flows and the individual cash flows of the projects. It's about making sure that our product is priced right in the market. So always looking at data and price points of other people's product in comparison to ours, and making sure that we know our product is going to be more expensive than a Charles Church or a Persimmon or a Barratt, but making sure it's within that boundary that we would expect. It's about making sure that our marketing strategies for the projects are correct. And, bearing in mind the first part of my career was all property sales. The team know that I will hone in on points of detail and, things that really irritate me. I know you have to have CGIs on projects when you're getting going. I understand that. But one of my big things is as soon as there's product, get it photographed, because all CGI says to me as a consumer is, I can't move into that.
Yeah.
Whereas the photographs tell me I could move into that.
Yeah.
And especially in the sales market that we've got at the moment, which is challenging, that is really important. So a lot of my time is taken up with sales, but over the last 14 years or so, I've held all sorts of parts of the business, from IT to corporate, legal work to financing to land. I ran the land side of the business for a long time. And therefore my days can be quite varied. I mean, yesterday I spent time on sales. I spent time with some of our lawyers on a land deal that's closing through. I was working with one of our guys on negotiating a price on a site now that we've got the planning permission on it. So my days can be really varied, through to executive team meetings with the rest of the team, looking at the projects and the challenges and the opportunities ahead of us, meeting with landowners. I had a meeting last week with some landowners where we've got an established contract with them, but we need a variation. So I went there to support the land director and the planner to say that I'm here as one of the owners of the business. We want to take this forward, but we need to get this variation. So it's not just sales. Sales is a large part of it, but it's other parts of the business too. I often call it the bits of the business that no one else wants to deal with. So still deal with things like data governance and GDPR, which are as dry as they sound, but are really important, because if you've got strong policies and good practices in place, you can sleep comfortably if there is a problem.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about Thakeham, with you and Rob, is that I always harp on that, and it was what I was taught from my first chief exec in house building, was a house builder is a sales-orientated business that happens to be in the business of building houses.
Correct.
And I think Thakeham is a classic example of that playing out, where you've got two sales-led people, at the fore, and the success of Thakeham is there to be seen as a result.
Don't get me wrong, we've had our moments where we've over-rotated into a construction business, and we regularly have to remind everyone we're a retail business. We are here to sell houses.
Yeah.
That's
great that you've got that from the top, because quite often, particularly where a house builder has grown, let's say it was someone that, it's a similar story, I suppose, someone that built their first house and then kind of grew through construction, they sort of think, well, our houses will sell themselves, without that sales background. We're forever having that battle saying, no, like sales it's the tail wagging the dog if we don't put sales first.
Product is key, street scene is key, marketing is key, and specification is important, and that's getting it just right. Not over-speccing it and giving yourself heavy build costs that you can't turn into cash, and not under-speccing it. And we've made those mistakes over the years, Simon. We've put too much stuff in and we haven't been paid for it because the market can't support it. Conversely, we've had sites where we've pulled things back a bit, and we've pulled it back a bit too far, and we've had to go back in retrospectively and change that. So it's trying to keep those things live in what I call a corporate memory. So we go, we did that and that didn't go well. So we're going to row back from there and try something different.
All
And
important lessons, though, aren't they, on that journey?
really
Better to learn
important
that
lessons.
early than
Yeah, I
later.
mean, there are decisions and decisions. Upgrading the quality of the carpet, it's fairly straightforward. But if you've forgotten to put some key feature in, like we did a development where we thought, garages here are not going to be all and end all, so we'll do some value engineering and pull the number of garages back. And we ended up having to build some very big sheds in gardens. We still make those mistakes. I wouldn't say we. I don't think any developer is ever perfect. You've got some developments that are good,
Yeah.
and some where you go, oh yeah, we could have done that better.
And so renowned for quality, from day one building a couple of houses to now, with sites of 1,300 units plus in front of you. How do you plan to continue to occupy and retain that reputation as a high quality house builder, and your position in the marketplace as an aspirational house builder when you're building at that kind of volume?
So I think we've had a number of departures in the kind of southeast market, which has definitely cleared some space for us. When me and Rob started to think about what kind of developer we wanted to be, because when you're buying other people's planning permissions, you can't really have the influence on that yourself, other than the spec you put in the house, because often the elevations are detailed for you. And when we were selling houses, two of the brands that we always knew, if we listed their houses for sale secondhand, that was as good as money in the bank in 4 months' time, and that was Bryant Homes, which have become part of Taylor Wimpey now, and Berkeley Homes. And Bryant in the 90s had a really cracking range of house types called the Victoriana range, and they looked great. Their curb appeal was fantastic. Specification was just about right. So we focused in on that and thought that's the kind of marketplace we want to be. But pull it up slightly to where Berkeley used to be in the southeast, where they do developments of 30 and 40 before they consolidated to doing developments of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
I think that bit's fascinating because you had a very clear vision for who you wanted to be. And actually, I think I'd say that's probably one of the reasons behind your success, because you had that clear vision. I think a lot of house builders are so land-led, they'll build whatever, wherever, just to keep the cash coming in.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting.
Yeah, no, we always had a clear vision that, we wanted to enjoy what we did, and building, volume of houses just to knock them out wasn't what we wanted to do. We wanted to have places that looked great architecture, and held a kind of premium place in the market. So how do we intend to keep that going as we scale up? We have been working really hard in the last nearly 4 years now on how we evolve our build process and build processes to achieve scale with quality. And we've done some projects in the last 12 months that have been the kind of final outturn of what we set out in motion 3 years ago. And the results have been really encouraging. They've had big impacts on program, big impacts on margin, where we've controlled cost, and they've had big impacts on quality, because the homes are going together more easily. The trades are not having to make adjustments on the fly, and therefore that's coming through in quality terms. So it's about our supply chain and working with our supply chain to always get the best that we can. And myself and Rob and the rest of our executive team will have personal relationships with the majority of our subcontractors that work for us, to make sure that we can always pull on the best quality labour in the locality. But I think the work we're doing now on 3D design, using building information and modelling to create a 3D model of every home that we build and every development we build, that is proving to be as successful as we'd hoped in terms of physical delivered quality, as well as financially measurable quality outcomes. So, facing into these bigger projects now, I think we feel more confident than ever that we can deliver them at scale and at quality, without any concerns at all. When we started Woodgate at Peace Pottage in 2019, that was a 619 unit project with a primary school, a hospice, a community cafe, community shop, hub building, village green, enormous amount of recreation space. that was a huge challenge, because I think at that point the biggest project that we'd ever built was about 60 homes.
Mm.
So it was 10 times the size of what we'd delivered in one place. Probably brings us back to the beginning of the conversation about naivety, which is, well, just go for it and work out the problems later. So it was a really steep learning curve, that project, but the outcome has been really good.
And I can vouch for that. We'll touch on Woodgate a bit later, but I didn't realise that you'd gone from 60 to that, because for anyone driving through that neck of the woods, Pease Pottage direction, pop and have a look, because it's a fantastic example of a new build site on scale, but with attention to detail at every turn. It's quite
Thanks, Simon. We're really proud of it, and I think it comes back to the stepping stones point and surrounding yourself with a great team. Our construction director that kicked that project off for us, John Gaffney, we had managed to attract him from 25 years at Barclay to join us. We couldn't have attracted John at the beginning of our journey. And I'm not a football person, but it's a bit like the football game in terms of, you have to start in a kind of Division 2, and then you work your way up to Division 1, and then you can get better players and push yourself into the,
I love that.
the next league and the next league. And that's been our journey, which is attracting the best that we can for the time, and inevitably you then move forward, and then you could attract better quality talent again. And that's been definitely part of the journey. And I think the team we've got now are as good as it gets. I'm really happy with the team we've got. I don't think you can get better designers, better construction staff, commercial staff, sales staff, all aspects of our business. I think the team is now in a really strong place.
So sustainability, the buzzword everywhere right now. Do customers really care? And how and why does Thakeham address sustainability?
So I think customers are becoming more aware of sustainability and energy performance. I think if you go back 5 years ago, a lot less so than they are now. I think we've had a very challenging economic time with cost of living, and I think that people probably came into that with very good intentions, and the cost of living put some of those intentions under pressure. But I think the thing that we're doing to try and highlight that to our customers is that actually, what is good for the environment can be good for your pocket. And if you look at the homes that we're delivering at Templegate at Burgess Hill, we've got 120 homes we're delivering there. Every home is zero carbon in its usage. And 48 of the homes there qualify for Octopus's zero bill scheme. So the fact they emit no carbon is good for the environment. The fact that 48 of them have zero bills is even better for your wallet. So I think that we're having to highlight those benefits to customers, but we are seeing that lots of customers are turning up at our door at Templegate aware of what the project is. They're aware of zero bills, and they can understand the financial benefit of it.
And I think, just to say, and I know I've confessed to this already, but I found that fascinating, because I put my neck on the block a year ago when I sat with Katie and we spoke about zero bills and sustainability, and from a marketing point of view, that being the core of or the desire to be the core of the messaging. And I said, I can't see customers caring that much, and my goodness, was I wrong, because it's proven a massive pull, hasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, if you talk to our sales team on site and look through the inquiries, the majority of them are zero bills related. So I think it is a big sales pull. At the moment, we're making a premium back on the values to cover the cost of the kit to make them zero bills. I think as it becomes more wide known in the marketplace what a zero bills home is to a consumer, I can see a premium being attached to them.
So there is a premium for the new build, for the zero bills homes still, and customers are willing to pay that.
We're generating a premium on the zero carbon homes against the kind of baseline pricing without, and we're then achieving a further uplift on the zero bills homes. And it's really interesting. We had a session at Templegate a few weeks ago with Barclays Bank, and they're our bank, and I had their head of ESG lending there, Dan, and our bank director, Zoe, and showed them round and showed them all the features of the homes and the kit that makes it happen. And at the end, to kind of close out, I said, "So what do you think then, Zoe?" And Zoe said, I'm underwhelmed. I said, oh, I don't know how to take that. She said, I thought they'd look and feel more different. I said, oh, what do you mean? She said, well, I expected them to be a bit more like a kind of Grand Designs home.
Yeah. More
She said,
Tesla-like.
yeah, and she said, they just look normal, like the kind of house that my mum and dad would buy. I said, that's the whole point. You can turn up and live in it, and you don't have to think about it. It looks after you. Now, I've got solar panels at home, and I've got an air source heat pump, and I've got a battery, but none of mine is controlled by AI technology like the Octopus solution. So I'm constantly having to manage it to get the best financial and carbon outcomes. Whereas if you buy a zero bills home at Templegate, you don't have to worry about that. The home looks after you, and you're just living it. So I think customers are starting to get on board with that. I think as energy prices inevitably climb, because they just will, I'm convinced there'll be more and more carbon taxation coming through society over the next 5 or 10 years. Then homes that have zero energy bills or more modest energy bills are going to have to become more attractive to consumers. I think you kind of said earlier, why do we do it? And where did it come from? Well, Rob is a great ideas man. The rest of us kind of do the detail and implementation for him, but he's the one that comes in on Monday morning and says, I've read this and we're going to have a look at that. Or I've had 2 weeks off over Christmas. I've had all these great ideas, so gather around, people. And how it started was Rob coming in one day and saying, I've read an article in the Sunday Times about hedgehogs. And we're like, okay. He said, and, hedgehog population is falling through the floor because of all the close board fenced gardens that homeowners put in and developers put in. But there is a solution to that in terms of putting in a hedgehog hole in the fences so the hedgehogs can move between garden to garden to do their foraging. And that was about 2015, I think, something like that. And that was our first sustainability, ESG, brand it what you want. That was our first kind of foray into that. Rob bounding in and saying, we're going to do this. And we started putting hedgehog holes in back then. And that then moved forward. And it would have been just prior to COVID. I think the carbon debate was starting to gather some momentum. And Rob's eldest child said to him, Dad, we've been doing plastic waste at school and what's ending up in the sea and the environment. He said, what are you doing about that? And that was probably the catalyst for us going, okay.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
We need to look at this. And we both got young families. We're both looking at it going, okay, so we have an influence here. What our children are going to inherit from us and their children. And actually, our consumers of tomorrow are the children of today. And there was it wasn't about kind of first mover commercial advantage or we can steal a premium on people. That wasn't the concept. It was we've actually got a responsibility to do something about it. And, developers across the land will generally do what the government tell them to do in terms of regulations and standards. But they can do more if they want. And that was the kind of critical point. Okay, we need to look at this. And that's where we started to look at plastic waste on our sites. We started to look at embodied carbon in the homes we're building, which is a real challenge. We started to look at operational carbon for ourselves, the carbon emissions of our homes when they were finished. We said from 2025 onwards, all homes we build will be zero carbon. We haven't got any projects starting with gas boilers that we're building for ourselves as a developer, and many of our housing association clients who we act for as a contractor, they're all in the same space. No air source heat pumps, please. So that was the kind of genesis moment, I suppose. A kind of 8-year-old saying, "Dad, what are you doing about plastic waste in the environment?" And that was where it began, really.
And so for anyone that doesn't know what Octopus is, that's been living under a rock, they're an energy supplier, in case you think they've done a deal with an octopus. But there was a big announcement at the Labour conference.
Yes.
You struck an amazing deal with Octopus,
Yes.
first of its kind. What is that deal, and why should other house builders be looking at similar kind of partnerships?
So we first met Octopus about 18 months ago, and they were very much profiled in the news with what they were doing on boilers and batteries and things like that, in terms of making air source heat pumps to replace boilers to help the high street domestic person. And we thought we should go and talk to these guys and just see, as a developer, what can we do with Octopus to try and do something different. So we went and saw them up in their offices in London, which are as crazy as you think they are. They are in an innocuous grey building. You walk into an innocuous white lobby, you go into a stainless steel lift, the doors open on their floor, and you walk out to a world of pink. It's a bit like a Barbie movie with octopuses everywhere. It is really very, very zany. And so we went and saw them, and we saw Michael Cottrell, who is the head of partnerships and Zero Bills program, who's recently just moved to Japan to head out Octopus in Japan. And he explained this concept to us of zero bills and how it works. And it's really simple. It's very complicated to make it work, but the concept is pretty simple. If the home can develop 120% of its energy usage through solar panels, they will guarantee the end user a zero energy bill. And that means we've got to put more PV on it, we've got to put a battery into it, an air source heat pump, and they then use their very sophisticated software to make it work. And that's how it got going. And we've launched our first project at Burgess Hill. That's gone really well. We've had further discussions with Octopus. We want to roll zero bills out across all the projects we're going to be dealing with in the future. So we've signed an agreement with them that says that all of our projects that we bring forward as a private developer, where practicable, will be zero bills qualifying. I think there are some challenges to deliver that. First of all, you've got planning challenges. Some local authorities still don't like the look of PV panels. I think the government have got a role to play in that, in helping persuade them, shall we say, that they need to get on board with this, because that's part of the energy solution for the future. And there's the cost of the kit. If you're selling a house at £500, £600 a square foot, £700 a square foot, as some of our projects are, the capital cost at £8,000 to £12,000 can be easily covered. When you're in territories where the capital values, or the pounds per square foot rather, in the £300 a foot range, it becomes more challenging. So part of the agreement with Octopus is that if we commit to bringing through these projects with zero bills on all of them, they will work with us effectively in a buying group to drive down the cost of panels, heat pumps and batteries, so that it becomes more affordable for us as a developer to put the kit into the properties. And to be clear, all we've needed to do is apply the kit. Our standard fabric is 31% better than Part L building rigs already. So it is that battery and a bit more PV. So working with them, we can tap into their supply chain of buying deals to get those products at a better price, which will mean we can roll it out at scale, which means that the prices will come down further, and it becomes a kind of quite a reverse of a vicious cycle. It becomes a beneficial cycle to all parties. And battery prices are coming down roughly 13% a year. PV panels have come down dramatically. So you can see a point where this won't be 10, 12, 14 grand a plot. It's going to be 4 or 5 grand a plot in the not too distant future. So that's the relationship we've got with them.
And can other house builders strike a similar relationship? Is that a closed relationship?
No, it's not closed at all. And Octopus would love to have those relationships with as many developers as they can do, because the more of us that join the buying group, if you like, the more we can leverage that buying power, that we can bring those prices down. They've got projects on the moment with other developers like Hill Group in Cambridgeshire and Bellway in Essex, and some smaller guys in the southwest. But I think where the real opportunity exists is in the affordable housing sector. To take away an energy bill from an affordable housing tenant, I think has got enormous potential. And we've composed a letter with Octopus and some housing associations, which is going to the government to explain to them how they can help make that a reality. And it's quite simple. There's if the housing associations were allowed to charge between £50 and £100 a month more rent on a zero bills home, that would cover the capital cost of the project. The end user would end up not having an energy bill, which would be anywhere between £100 and £200 a month. So they're saving money. The housing association, the kit is being paid for through the rent, costs the government no cash because there's no cash requirement for the government. It's a no cash win-win policy for all parties. But the government have got to enable that by changing the regulation to allow that to happen. And then I think there's a huge market because that is an element of society that really could do with that protection from energy price fluctuations. Not to say high street consumers shouldn't, because clearly they should, but they're particularly vulnerable to it.
And so zooming out a little bit now on the business, so growing a business from scratch into the roaring success that's Thakeham today, what are your key takeaways from the business?
I think it's about understanding your place in the market. What kind of developer do you want to be? Do you want to be building, at the lower end of the market and that's your space? Would stick to it. Don't keep going up and down the scale. We've always wanted to be at that kind of, I call it premium volume. If you put it in car terms, it's 5 Series man, it's A6 man and woman. That's the target market. It's kind of aspirational, but it's attainable to a lot of people. So we've kind of always stuck at that. I think cost control is critical, and having real clarity around your costs, both at a project level, an overhead level. Specification's important, and what I mean by that is not over specifying your product. I think there's we work as a main contractor for some housing associations who are looking to do private sale, and some of their specification, I would question they're getting value back for that, yet they're paying thousands to put it in. We're working for one client at the moment in particular, and the specification we're putting in for them, they're getting no revenue for that. It's just cost. So I think that is really critical. Find good people and retain them, and look after them. And look after them doesn't just mean financially look after them. It means about mentally looking after them. So providing a place to work that is enjoyable. Look, we all have challenging times, and this market is very challenging at the moment. But one of the things that we identified coming out of COVID was the issue with mental health. And, we had lots of staff that had developed very acute mental health challenges. And when they were going to the NHS to get referrals, they were being quoted months and months to see somebody. So what we did is we found a locally based counsellor, and we employed them for a day a week, and very discreetly members of staff could book a session to go and see this counsellor and try and talk their problems through, and that has had a really big impact on a number of our staff who again, what is good for them is good for us, because it means they're back to themselves, performing, doing their jobs properly. So I think we've built a really good culture in the business around that support. I often say that we treat people like adults until they behave like children, and some of the people that work for me will say, Julian, do you mind? I've got to go at 4 on Thursday to the dentist appointment. I'll make it up to you. It's like, look, just don't worry about it. You will work extra time at some point, and at some point you'll know you're swinging it too far the other way, or I'll have a gut feeling. So don't keep checking on me, stuff like that. Just do your job, do it well, put the hours in that need to be done, and we'll work it out. So I think it's about looking after your people.
And I think so. What's fascinating? So your first answer was target audience led. The 5 Series customer, the A6 customers of the world, and coming back full circle to the sales orientated business. It's all about knowing your market, and the developments that we see and the developers, unfortunately, that go south are the ones that never really identified that. And the developments that we see with problems are where there was no target audience in mind.
Right.
The product's sitting there because people don't know that product's for them.
That's right.
So I find it fascinating that was your
and attention to detail is really important. And again, we don't get it right all the time. Just before we opened the show home at Templegate at Burgess Hill, I went there for a pre-launch inspection, and I was looking at the street scene with the site manager, and plot number 4, which was the show home, it's a timber boarded elevation on the front, and I just looked at it and thought, that looks something wrong. There's something missing there. And eventually I worked out what it was. And the LED flashing was missing underneath the windowsills on the weatherboarding. And I said to Thomas, the site manager, is there meant to be LED flashing there to dress it? He said, oh, thank goodness you've noticed it. I said, what do you mean, thank goodness I've noticed it? He said, well, it was on the original drawings, but the surveyors had deleted it from the order to save some money. I was like, but it looks wrong. And you know, if you don't have that attention to detail and have that courage of conviction, I don't know, that was probably 300 or 400 quid. But it made so much impact on the front of that house. It just looked unfinished. And one of the things that all the staff know that I hate on any of our elevations is what I call house acne. And what that is we spend all this time designing these beautiful elevations and thinking about it. And then what developers normally do is when the M&E contractors turn up, the plumbers and the electricians, they just put a boiler on that wall and bosh a flue out the side of it. Or they core a hole in the wall to have a flue from the kitchen extractor hood or the downstairs cloakroom. And suddenly these elevations are covered in vents and flues and track pipe for gas work, and it looks horrible. So all of our houses that we build as a developer for ourselves don't have any of that. They all have boiler flues that are vented out through they don't have boiler flues anymore because they're all air source heat pump, but they were all flow through the roof. All the extraction goes through the roof. We don't have any track pipe work. It's been an obsession to get these things looking clean and right for the future. They're not going to look worse and worse as the boiler fluid degrades and starts to break up and things like that.
I love that term, house acne.
Yeah.
That's a great one.
That's very much an internal term.
So personally, what are the areas that you're most passionate and excited about within the business?
Well, obviously it's sales, and I can't wait for the sales market to return to a much more bouncy level so we can be jumping around the office when we've done...
You and me both.
Yeah, done 2 or 3 sales at a weekend in a particular site. It's always going to be sales for me, the site presentation and the delivery. You know, we live with these projects for, well, as we said earlier, sometimes 12 plus years. So seeing them delivered on the ground is a real passion. You know, I get excited when we break into the site and we start clearing it, getting it ready. But really, for me, it's when that first street scene is ready, that show home complex, that finished product. That's when the excitement starts to build. And then as the project delivers more street scene, more landscaping, that's what I really, really enjoy seeing. And then seeing life in the development. You know, if I go to Woodgate now and you see, you know, the kids on the green, you see the kind of all the children going to the school in the morning or coming away at the end of the day. You see the fitness camps on the green that have emerged. You see people walking their dogs. I mean, it's you go, wow, we've actually created a community here from what was a car boot site. I mean, it's remarkable. Yeah, you know, and I think, you know, we've got real responsibility as developers to create places that are going to be fit for the future, both in terms of their environmental performance, but also the societal impact. You know, lots of studies show that if you've got access to green space outside your house, your mental health outcomes are better. So, yeah, those are the things that really excite me. We could get into the nitty gritty of, you know, how we're building houses now, and that is exciting, but it's not as exciting as seeing that show home open, seeing those first people move in.
Yeah, communities flourishing.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And seeing deal sheets on a Monday morning.
Excellent. Yeah. That's what we want. And what do you feel, so personally, what do you feel is the single greatest opportunity and the single greatest threat to house building? So I think the greatest opportunity at the moment could be the planning reforms. I think the single greatest threat in the last 5 years has been the planning system. The uncertainty, the cost, the bureaucracy. I'm sure many of your podcast listeners will have had battle scars of
different kinds of planning battles, many of which they probably will ultimately have won, but having gone through protracted periods of pain and cost to get there. So, and I think that's still a threat, the planning system. I am really confident that the new government are going to deliver the planning reforms as they've consulted on in the recent weeks. And I think there is still more for them to do in terms of making the planning system fit for purpose to deliver the homes that we need. I mean, we're needing targets of 300,000 homes a year. Has been widely talked about, but the real number is more like 370. So we're going to have to over double output to get to those numbers. Well, that's got to start with the planning system. So I think the greatest opportunity is the planning system. I think the greatest threat over the next few years is going to be not necessarily demand side, because I think that will come back. I think it's the pressure the demand side will put on the industry from an inflation point of view. And I think construction inflation was a really acute issue post-COVID, more so than in the previous 10 years. And I can see there being another acute inflation problem potentially in the next few years. I think the thing that may fetter that is the market is still fairly subdued.
Julian, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you being so open and honest. You've given away a lot of inside intel, so thank you.
No, thanks for inviting me, Simon.
Pleasure.